Hey guys, so I'm just video blogging about a random little brain fart that I had. I've been thinking about MMA as usual and some of the directions that it's taking, and I have a hypothesis that MMA is going to eventually start to get back to its traditional roots, and we're already beginning to see a little bit about that direction. You look at Anderson Silva's last couple fights. He's had Steven Seagal in his corner, who's a pretty traditional martial artist, and then there was that Machida fight, of course, and then that famous front kick that's been coming out of the Black House camp, and that's not really an Aikido move, but they've given credit to Steven Seagal about that. Steven Seagal, even though people have a lot of things to say about him, he was a very accomplished martial artist in his time before he became a movie star. He was known as one of the he was actually, I think, the first American black belt and teacher in Aikido. And Aikido is something that people don't really understand. There's a lot of people who can't perform with Aikido, but I've seen my share of people who, if they know what they're doing, it can be actually quite effective, and just something you just don't master in a couple of years. It does take a lifetime of knowledge. My background, I've studied the traditional arts from karate to taekwondo, to now the more popular arts like Thai boxing and BJJ for the last 20 years. So, I'm all for the traditional arts and also the modern arts. I think the modern arts definitely bring something into practical realms. At a very quick point, you can take, say, 2 to 3 months of boxing and really get something out of that. Whereas 2 to 3 months in Aikido, you really don't learn anything. Even after 2 years, you don't really learn anything that's necessarily practical. But on an ultimate level, I think that something like Aikido can be valuable. But the reason why I'll say there's this trend that I think is going to continue to evolve. A lot of people think pretty much, I've had this conversation with other people, that think pretty much the UFC and what it is fighting wise is pretty much where it's at, and it's not going to evolve much. But MMA in my mind is just really starting to blossom. But 10 years ago, when you talk to people, they would have thought striking is not very valuable. It was just pretty much all grappling. There wasn't any really good strikers who knew also how to grapple at the same time to neutralize things, and also knew how to adapt it to the MMA ring. Now that's not the case. You don't have too many guys who are pure grapplers do too well in the UFC and MMA. Partially that's also a result of because they've changed the rules now that you can't sit there and hold a guy for 10 minutes straight, and they have time limits and things like that. But still, for the most part, though, a lot of the guys now, good strikers, they actually have a good awareness of the ground game and enough to neutralize it. I definitely think that MMA is continuing to evolve. I still know that there's a lot of techniques that that are being underutilized. Even some of the talked about techniques like simply the front kick has been known as to be a very underutilized technique, as well as the jab as well. And there's a lot of different other stuff right now that basically there's a certain comfort zone in MMA as to what works and what doesn't, and generally that consensus is going to expand. And I think eventually, after a certain point, some of the fighters are going to even reach towards some of the techniques of the traditional arts to be able to pull something different out of their hat. So, the traditional arts, a lot of people don't take them seriously because I do believe it's true that some of them have gotten away from their original purpose, which was really to be able to defend yourself and some of the techniques there. And some people can't, it came to the point with the traditional arts where a lot of people couldn't even explain their technique or the rationale behind it, but it was developed for a reason. So, I think that, it was originally developed for the reason of some very practical purposes. A good example would be karate. If you look at a lot of the stances, there's very wide stances, very square stances, And you know, for real fighting, street fighting, most people will consider that fairly impractical because it's not very mobile. You know, you're not going to stand in a horse stance and punch somebody. But those stances actually derive from weapon stances. If you look at you know, karate, they had you know, the weapons like the bow stick, the kama, sickle, and nunchaku, all those things, and those all came from the wide stances to be able to have a good base, because they'd be fighting. Karate was developed to fight against samurais who were usually in armor or horseback, and you know, and a lot of the fighting would be with weapons. So, you know, so there's a reason for that. That I do agree that after a certain point it gets out of context and people forget about what the reasoning for it is. But you know, there's a wealth of knowledge in the traditional arts that I think that eventually was going to be utilized in MMA. So it's going to be interesting to see in the next couple of years what happens in MMA as it tightens up, and you know, what sort of techniques we start to see being pulled out of the hats. So curious to what you guys think.